But before we get on to that, Robin Brown wants to come and just share a quick item with you. Robin.
At the beginning of this session on informed decision making, it's appropriate for us to note and mark the sudden passing of Jackie Booth. Now, many people in this room were friends with Jackie and worked directly or indirectly with Jackie. She's been a major force in the assembly, integration, and presentation of scientific information for informed decision making. She worked with community groups, First Nations, NGOs, all levels of government. She was a lead author on the ecosystem assessment for the PNCIMA area. Her West Coast friends and collaborators may be less familiar with the fact that her early career was spent gathering the basic marine ecosystem information that went into the environmental impact assessment for oil and gas exploration on the Grand Banks. Now, many speakers have noted that this forum is very well attended, but there's a void where Jackie should be. And our sincere condolences go out to her family at this very difficult time. Thank you.
Now, I think the way this is going to be done is that you'll hear from each of these four people, one right after another, and then questions for any of them after that. And I'm not going to give long introductions, but I know that Russ Jones is starting out, Russ Jones from the Haida Fisheries, and he's going to talk about First Nations knowledge. I guess coming up here, what do you think? Or speaking from there, what's your pleasure? Come on. Great, thank you.
Singait La. Kingait Ajus Hanudik Kegaga. Good day. My Haida name is Kingait Ajus. And I guess my presentation's up, and I wanted to first just acknowledge the Musqueam First Nation that we're on their territory. And also just mention that, Jackie Booth did work a little bit with us on the kind of database that we worked on in our group. So we're sorry to hear, about that, about her passing. So I'll be describing the work underway by First Nations to document traditional knowledge in PNCIMA. And I'm part of a team that's working on this in Haida Gwaii. And the group in the back there with holding the yellow balls is, they're part of the Haida Marine Work Group. And they're providing oversight and also a great deal of input to the study. And there's also several other staff and Haida Fisheries Program who are working on the study that are here today. So how do I change slides? Oh, here it is.
Just press that and they'll change it.
Okay. So here's an outline of my talk. I'm going to start out with a definition, and then I'll briefly describe the First Nation partnerships in this study. Then I'll provide some examples of products from the Haida study. And I'll finish with two slides. One compares traditional and scientific knowledge. The other describes how traditional knowledge will help with marine planning. I think I have to go back one. Okay. Now I'll go forward one. Okay, I think there's a slide that's missing here, and I'll just talk briefly to it. So there's a definition of traditional ecological knowledge by Fikret Burks, who has done extensive work with First Nations in the Arctic. And I'll just read his definition. It's a cumulative body of knowledge, practice, and beliefs evolving by adaptive processes and handed down through generations by cultural transmission about the relationship of living things, including human beings, with one another and the environment. So it points out that traditional ecological knowledge includes knowledge, practices, and beliefs. So it's not just data. We have a word, Yahgudang in Haida, and it means respect, and it's an example of a Haida practice. It means respect for all living things, for the food we eat, and it guides how we treat each other, the land, and the ocean. Our traditional knowledge is passed down through generations and can be diminished if cultural practices change. Our displacement from the commercial fishery has resulted in a generation of Haida that did not grow up living and traveling in Haida Gwaii waters. And it's hard to maintain a connection with the ocean and the land if there are no boats in a community. New Haida programs such as Watchman programs and youth rediscovery programs have helped to provide continuity. So now I'll go on to the First Nation partnerships in this study. So the communities shown on the map are involved in similar traditional knowledge studies. We're covering parallel topics, but we have varying levels of documentation and sometimes different methods. There's still work to be done to develop protocols for sharing information between communities and the larger First Nation areas. Next, just as an example, I'll try to cover how the Haida study was done and just give an indication of the types of products which will come out of it that could be used in marine planning. These are some of the knowledge themes that we covered. So a lot of it was map-based, so basically locations of things like settlements, camps, or cultural sites. We also asked people to identify Haida fishing and gathering sites. We asked them for advice on ecologically important areas. We asked them about trends in marine species populations and also kind of how that's changed over time in terms of how available they are. And we also documented the history of individuals. So, losing my place here. Well, this slide shows some of the methods. So we collected information primarily through interviews. We didn't go back to interviews that had been done by others, even though that would have been quite useful, or do literature reviews. So we focused on people that were there now, and some of them were elders, who fished in the area for all their lives. So we did both short interviews, which were map-based, and then also longer oral history interviews. And all the interviews were audio or video recorded. They were then transcribed, and then the information was brought back to that individual just to verify it, that we had it correct. And then also we plan on going back to validate the community, the composite information, with the community. So we have a whole set of maps that are where these locations and sites are marked on marine charts, and we also have a database that's being created from the map and transcript information. We've been working on this now for about 2 years, and we expect that we'll have this study finished by the end of this year. So what we have so far is we've completed 48 short interviews and 4 longer oral history interviews. We've interviewed about 8 women and 44 men. The average age is about 70, and they've ranged from about 33 to 96. We have about 120 hours of audio and video recording and about 300 completed maps. And we've collected information on over 200 marine and maritime species. And of course, there's a lot more information about some species, but some of the other information is also quite important.